Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to PAL Ottawa and another session of the Spring to Summer series. Today's presentation will be Sculpting in Ice, Snow, and Sand. My journey as an intrepid touring ephemeral sculptor with James Cook, who joins us here in our virtual studio. Thank you for joining us all today. I'm David Globerman, and I'm the coordinator with Supporting Cast with PAL Ottawa, and I'll be your host today. Before we get started, I would ask that you turn off your videos, unless you really want to be on camera, which is fine with us. And I see you've got your audios off as well, which is fine. We will be recording this session, and it will be uploaded on our PAL YouTube channel early next week. So for those of you that wish to look at James' session again, that's great. As well, it'll give an opportunity for people that could not attend today to look at it, as well as hopefully we'll have James's slides up as well for future viewing. So that's great. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to submit them through the chat function, and James will try to get to them probably at the end of today's session. Or if you'd like, James, you can certainly answer them as, integrate them into your presentation as we go along. Today's social circle presentation, or the session, is one of many that we've been holding since May, and we will be continuing with the Spring into Summer series into the end of June, and we have many more to come. So I would encourage all of you to try to tune in as much as you can. If you can't go live, then visit our PAL YouTube channel, and once you see the videos, feel free to hit like and share. And if you have any comments about James's performance session, which I'm sure will be very positive, please send it to me at supportingcast@palottawa.org. That's supportingcast@palottawa.org. Today's presentation is funded by the City of Ottawa. We'd like to extend our appreciation to the City of Ottawa for making this presentation, as well as the entire, or I shouldn't say the entire, part of the Spring into series possible. A little bit about James. James Cook was born in Sudbury, Ontario, and grew up in Kirkland Lake, where he acquired his love of the outdoors, which isn't hard to do when you're up north, or anywhere for that matter. He was always a naturally talented artist by nature, and is also a cartoonist, an award-winning pumpkin carver. It's great around Halloween, ice sculptor, snow sculptor, painter, and a handcrafter of fishing tackle. James studied graphic design at George Brown College in Toronto and completed his diploma in 1988. He is freelanced as an illustrator, courtroom artist, and is a self-accomplished fine artist and sculptor working in many different mediums. James's deep love of nature is reflected in his Northern Ontario landscapes and other parts of Canada he visits randomly, which he paints mainly in oil on canvas in a style inspired of the Group of Seven, the Impressionists, and the Pointillists. James has had one oil painting entitled Skaters at Science North, published on the January page of the 2016 Picture Our Lakes calendar, and another entitled Autumn Lighting on Othello Avenue, published in the 2020 Multifaith Calendar. He has also had old apple orchards at Lincoln Fields on display in the Legislative Assembly of Ontario in Toronto through 2019, and flooding at Britannia Park flooding at Britannia Park at the Legislative Assembly of Ontario as well through 2020. James has also produced ice sculptures in Ottawa, Waterloo, Sudbury, Toronto, and Yellowknife, snow sculptures in Kirkland Lake, Sudbury, Thunder Bay and Edmonton sand sculptures in Gatineau, North Bay, and Lislet, Quebec, and carved pumpkins in Sudbury and Ottawa. So he's been around doing a lot of carving and sculpting. James relocated from Sudbury to Ottawa in May 2016 to broaden his horizons in the visual arts. In June 2017, he was commissioned to produce a multiple colored ice cream sculpture, which is probably a historical first. And who doesn't love ice cream, whatever it's made out of? Anyways, without any further ado, let's give a warm round of applause to James.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll tell you a little bit about what I've been up to. I've been a full-time visual artist since 2012. And along the way, I've added these ephemeral sculpting methods. This one here, I'm specializing in ice, snow, and sand. And here we start. Okay, here we go. Here we start in Sudbury in the winter of 2012. It's a volunteer project where I offered my services to sculpt a natural size model of a 1911 Packard touring car. That make and model was selected because it was the first motor car to tour on the streets of Sudbury in its time. It's a snow sculpture. It was made right out of a heap of parking lot snow. Very challenging form of snow to try to sculpt when it's full of salt and dirt. So that presentation is, well, a bit rough.
James, sorry to interject. It's David. Is it possible for you to make the image larger?
I don't know if I.
I think if you use slideshow,
Oh,
slide.
See, yeah, up at the top.
right over here.
You keep going to the right. Keep
On the
going.
right.
You see slideshow?
Okay.
Hit that. And then you can do from the beginning or from the current slide down.
From the current slide.
Yeah.
Right over
From
here.
the current slide. Can you see it written there? Go down one row.
It's right here.
Oh, I can't see anything from this end. Sorry.
Go over to the left. Again. Now go down from current slide. Down. There. Okay.
There you go.
Click. Wonderful. Thank you.
There you go. Thanks, Anne.
Oh, wait.
We have a Zoom expert with Anne Mayhew. Thank you.
Okay. How do I go to the next slide now?
You can just hit your arrow button on your computer.
Okay, here we go. This one, it started off as just a 5-gallon bucket of tap water. I filled up and put out in the winter cold. Let it freeze outside at like 25 or so below, and I carved this cat, a Turkish van cat to be exact. And some of my fans have called it a pet cemetery cat. This was one of my first ice sculptures. It was an experiment. It was also a practice run because that same winter I had been accepted to carve ice at what's the Ottawa venue called? Oh, the carnival there. The name slipped my mind.
Winterlude.
Winterlude, that's the one. Okay. So before going to Winterlude, I ran this experiment, carving out of ice. And here's my first time carving in Ottawa in 2015. A little boy with his catch, a wooden pole fishing rod. That was the one block challenge. We have a 2-hour timeline to transform a 300-pound block of ice into something. And finally, this one was done in Toronto. They had a theme with ancient Egypt at the time. And this was meant to be Bast, the ancient Egyptian goddess. It too was carved out of one 300-pound block of ice. And that's another one out of 2015. This was done in Waterloo. It was an open theme, and so it was very off the cuff. I decided to try to carve a leaping muskie. We move on to the summer of 2015, and this is Merveille de Sable in Gatineau. And as you can see on the left side, there was a collapse that took place, and that affected the final score. But other than that, it was a lot of fun trying. The theme there was my memory slips my mind sometimes. The lost treasures, something about lost treasures. So I produced this piece and I called it the Pharaohs Tackle Box. So it looks a bit like the Ark of the Covenant, but then you look at it partly open and you see what looks like fishing lures and hooks spilling out. A snapping turtle, also a volunteer project I did at River and Sky Music and Camping Festival. It's a big camping and music festival up by Sturgeon Falls. And this project I participated in, it was called Land Art, or making art out of things you find on the ground. And my chosen medium there was, of course, sand. This is another independent project. I rallied all my nieces and nephews, as well as my daughter, into a group to do this on the beach on Sculpting Lake near North Bay. And it made the local paper. The headline screamed crocodile sighting on Lake Nosbonsing. Except it's made entirely of sand, not leather and razor sharp teeth. Moving up to the winter of 16, this is another volunteer project I did in Sudbury not too long before moving out of there. And it's called, of course, Skaters. And it's a project I did on location while, it was family day to be exact. So this is the end product. I took a snap while darkness was kind of moving in. This one's called Minions in Love. I had originally carved a heart jutting out in between the two. Unfortunately, the bright sun of that day caused it to collapse. As I found out, the direct sunlight is quite hard on ice when you're trying to carve something out of it. And that's That's the most fickle part of ice carving, is when the weather gets especially uncooperative or a little too warm, and challenges do come up. This one's my prize winner. It's called Goldfish. This was Waterloo in 2016. This one carved out of 3 blocks of ice. This is Merveille de Sable 2016. Alice, Arthur, and the Excalibur sword in the I'll be using forging, an anvil, to be exact. Moving on to 2017, this is Thunder Bay, and beside me is another sculptor named Komi Seshi, who partnered with me to do this project in Thunder Bay. And the sculpture is a half-size scale model of the Royal Hudson locomotive. It's an iconic Canadian train locomotive of its time. This one is called April Fool. It was also, this is a Waterloo 2017. And this is where I reverse the roles of fisher and fish. It was inordinately warm that day, and even the ice was warping a bit as I worked on it. And the fishing rod sagged a bit lower than I had planned for it. And it was a sculpture that turned a few heads. Now here's this is ice cream. This one took place in June of 2017, where I partnered with a company that made pastries. So we tried a run at producing a few ice cream sculptures, and turns out to be logistically quite difficult and needing a walk-in freezer to be really effective. So this was something we tried, but we didn't appear to attract the amount of clientele that we would have really needed to continue to make this one possible. But I will certainly hope to revisit this one if I ever get my own walk-in freezer. This is Merveille de Sable in Gatineau 2017. The theme that time was O Canada, but the O was spelled in the French form for water, EAU. So I sculpted the salmon run with bald eagles trying to catch them, and a bear also snacking on his catch at the foot of the falls. This is here in Ottawa, Winterlude 2018, and this one's called Out of the Belfry. As you can see, what's really living in that clock tower. This is also done in Ottawa. This one is called Polar Dip. That too was, I think, a 2-hour or 3-hour challenge. And this one also here in Ottawa in 2018, called My Friend Jeremiah in ice. Toronto, also 2018, that's the Frog Prince. This is Thunder Bay 2018, and a tribute to Gordon Downey of the Tragically Hip. It did not win the first prize, but it did make the front page of the local newspaper the week after. This is Yellowknife 2018. This is called The Theory of Old Slavey, the legendary monster that is said to live in Great Slave Lake. The descriptions I read or heard about it sound very much like a sturgeon, so I sculpted a sturgeon out of ice. This is a Merveille de Sable in Gatineau, 2019. And this time around, I chose actual Quebec-based animated characters called Tupi et Binou. And they were invented by a Quebec artist. And I was kind of going in line with local or provincial themes here. This one's a butterfly in 15 minutes that was done at Lillet, Sable Glace Lillet in, I think, 18. Starting with an overturned beach pail of moist sand and then carving the shape out. Very bim bam boom. Again, the sand version of my friend Jeremiah, done at Sable Glace Lillet. This is Toronto 2019, where the theme of the event was Hollywood. So I put King Kong up on the CN Tower. This is in 2019, and it's called Rude Surprise by Old Slavey. The fish popping up out of the water and overturning a passing kayaker. This is the only surviving picture I found of that event. So all my daytime shots somehow either failed or got corrupted or lost. But at least I have this nighttime shot remaining. Okay, this one turned on its side somehow. This is Gatineau, Merveille de Sable 2019. And here I sculpted a caribou coming up against a background of a snow-covered spruce tree and northern lights. This is Sable Glace Lillet 2019. The theme was legendary monsters, so I did Mugwump, the legendary monster of Lake Temiskaming. And again, just turning written descriptions into a physical representation. A big gaping mouth with teeth. And skin like some kind of reptile. This one was Saguenay, up in Saguenay to be exact. And the theme I chose there was based on the fact that explorer Jacques Cartier came through there one time looking for some kind of a lost legendary civilization, but instead found abundant natural resources that are readily accessible by water. So the man represents Jacques Cartier in a landing boat with birds perched on the edges and whales splashing in the water all around them. This is Edmonton, where I sculpted a T-Rex dinosaur out of snow. And finally, my last stop in 2020, this was Yellowknife, where space was the theme. So I did a model of the lunar exploration module of the Apollo missions, and an astronaut being held hostage by this little alien that happened to reside on, well, whatever planet that we landed the module on. And finally, last but not least, let's see quite clear in this picture, but this is also Yellowknife, my last stop. And that's the Star Trek Enterprise hovering over the skyline of Yellowknife, again with a backdrop of the sea skyline and the northern lights. So this concludes the tour, and so now with the pandemic, the pandemic completely brought that to a stop. And also I used to model in art studios and art schools. That too was all brought down by the pandemic. So I'm making my own counter move in the face of that and returning to study again in September, in that I will be going to Algonquin College and taking a 1-year full-time course in drawing foundations for animation and illustration to fill up a schedule that was otherwise pretty much laid bare by the pandemic. So I hope you have lots of questions that I can answer. I'm going to take a look at chat. Okay, no questions. Anybody want to ask about anything?
Here's a question from Brenda Sullivan.
Okay.
Do you do sketches first to inform your sculptures?
I do sketches, and I also will produce a miniature model out of this modeling clay that you can use and reuse.
Interesting. What are the challenges in working with ice? Like, do you have when you're working on a certain section, do you have sort of a certain time limit that you can work on that area? For example, if you're making fins for fish, do you have a certain time limit that you can work on a particular area before it starts melting?
It wouldn't be so much a particular area. The whole sculpture would be affected by a weather event of that kind. And when it does warm up, the ice does deteriorate. It breaks up into these kind of honeycomb-shaped pieces. And when you try to graft pieces together, they won't stick together. This is where it gets challenging. But as long as the ambient temperature is -10 or colder, it's pretty easy going usually.
-10, okay.
Yeah. But the carving contest itself has a timeline of its own.
Right.
Smallest, anywhere from 2 hours to 3 days or more, depending on the project, the venue, other things.
Are you using any? Are you spraying any water on the ice while you're carving to indent certain areas or smooth out certain areas?
Not so much as a smoothing agent, but it can make just the mere fact of dousing the sculpture with water will make it clearer, more transparent.
Right. Okay. And what about another question from Brenda? What tools are you using for sand sculptures?
For sand sculpture, it's just a small folding shovel, a garden shovel, and a variety of small tools, mostly knives and chisels, or that double as knives and chisels. For sculpting sand, you can use these trowels for plaster sometimes, palette knives, butter knife, mostly very common objects, nothing too fancy. It's like you can't buy specific tools for sand sculpting, but there are many things you can use, many common objects that you can use and do a good job for sculpting sand. And again, that too, it depends on the personal style of the artist and ways of doing things.
How long did it take you to do that alligator?
It took the whole bunch of us about 4 hours to, that includes piling up the sand, pressing it down, and then shaping.
Question from Boo. How do you keep the sand together? Can you explain the process from the start?
What a lot of sculptors do is they'll mix a batch of diluted school glue. That's the most common formula, school glue or white wood glue, in about a 1:10 ratio, and be spraying it with spray bottles as the sculpture is being worked on. And especially after you've completed a detail, you spray it again, and that kind of seals it or solidifies it, keeps it together for at least the time that the event is running.
I see. A question from Brenda. What happens to the sand sculptures after the event? Do they just let the sculptures drift away naturally, or do you have to take the sculptures down?
Most venues take them down after the venue is complete, and there are others that will leave them standing all through the weeks or months to follow until the rain and elements do break them down or collapse them.
Right. So James, what are your plans? Oh, sorry, another question from Brenda. Do you sculpt in other materials besides the ones that you've identified? The sand.
Yeah. Yes, I've dabbled a bit in soapstone and limestone, both.
Interesting.
And wood.
Question from Sharon
Can I
in the raspberry beret. Go
can I
ahead.
jump in there? It's a red beret, French Canadian red beret. Okay, yeah, you're fascinating. Thank you for your whirlwind tour of your sculptures. It's amazing. It's like you demystified two things. I always see these amazing sculptures, and then we never get to see the people behind them. So in Ottawa proper, the ice sculptures especially, and the sand sculptures. So two things, so it looks like you got to make a big plan about where you're going to go in the world or the country and how you're going to be able to compete, I guess, in these things. And then, and obviously part of that is how you're making a partial living by that. And then the practical side of what you're doing now, which is transitioning to animation, which is also fascinating, because the idea of taking one medium and then going into another, I think that's a brilliant idea.
Well, it's a color way of turning uncertainty into
Mhm.
certainty, or you can call it
Yes.
whatever, because I have no idea if I'll tour again as a snow and ice and sand carver. I don't know when or what contest will still be up and running in that section.
But do you have to plan since 2015 or 12, I think, when you started doing it, you have to sort of make a plan about where you're going and what you're going to compete in?
Oh yes, so the planning typically starts as much as 6 months before the event itself. So I'm planning my winter during the summer and vice versa.
And is there do they charge, do they pay you to come, or how does that work out when you go to like Yellowknife and things like that?
Well, again, that depends on the venue. Some venues are more generous than others. Some
Mhm.
are more also competitive than others. And the better you are at it,
Mm.
and the more background you have in it, the more you're going to get the gigs that do pay either break even or a small profit.
Mhm. Are you sponsored? Are you sponsored by like people outside the organization that does the event?
Not not so much by specific individuals or businesses, but there usually is some kind of business sponsorship at the event itself.
Mhm.
And what support systems that can be had in going to an event, especially a non-paying event, at the very least,
Mhm.
the transportation and meals and hotel. So some venues they just give you that, but no honorarium of any kind.
Mhm.
But again, it's a matter of building your background and your track record,
Hmm.
and the higher paying ones get easier to break into.
And you're transitioning now to animation.
Very possibly. That's why I'm starting with a 1 year
Mhm.
schooling course, and then just gonna complete that one and think it over and possibly entertain other visual arts education following that.
Which actual program are you entering at Algonquin?
Drawing foundations for animation and illustration.
Okay, so that's a 1 year certification or
1
something.
year.
Yeah, that's really great idea. Great. Exciting.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Question from Brenda. As things as things move out of the pandemic, maybe you could teach others how to sculpt in sand or ice.
Mhm.
Okay, I think there's a preceding question. I don't know if I answered or
Missed
not.
that one, sorry. Oh, sorry, from Boo. Do you start out with a pile of sand and cut into it, or start from nothing and add to it?
Usually, the sand is formed in and compacted in these molds. These are square shaped molds into a kind of a pyramid shape. And sand sculptures have to be designed within that shape for obvious reasons. But the sand is wetted and compacted in forms. It's like a kind of a layer cake kind of deal, where each succeeding layer is smaller until you have like a kind of a step pyramid to start with. And that's how we start sculpting sand. And if we don't have forms for pressing and compacting sand, then we do a kind of a lasagna method of just placing wet pads of sand about the size of your hand. And it's like you're there too, you're building a kind of a pyramid or cone-shaped pile for your sculpture.
Interesting. Have you ever tried, oh, sorry, I'm going to get back to, where are we here? Just give me a second. Yeah, from Brenda, as things move out of the pandemic, maybe you could teach others how to sculpt in sand or ice.
Oh, that would be a good one. Like I don't see myself as having that much experience, especially for ice carving. And in the ice competitions I go to, I compete against people who do that every day, and I've been doing it every day for decades. So if I was teaching anybody to carve ice, I could show them what I know and I experienced.
Yeah.
But maybe you'll be at par with me. Maybe the student in that case could outdo me. Who knows? Once shown a bit how to do it.
Right. Yeah, kids might really enjoy it.
Mhm.
You know.
Oh, especially sand sculpting, because that's the root of it. The sand castles are the root of that medium.
Hmm.
And old folks like me too.
Yeah, I'm just going to jump in and say that because of the pandemic, it would be nice to teach the experience of the experience, which is not creating something that lasts, but something which is just there and gone. And so really it's like you're giving people the experience rather than the thing. So it could be a very cool thing if I'm not saying this specifically, but I'm sure that the city of Ottawa or there would be a way to support you doing a program where you just try it. Just try opening it up to young or old, just that experience.
Well, I do hope to lead workshops in some of these mediums, especially carving pumpkins. In fact, I had to cancel a pumpkin show last year because of COVID.
Was that in Ottawa?
It was here in Ottawa.
Is it the one down on Pansy or Woodbine Lane?
I forget where it was take place, but it was going to be a live on the spot workshop.
Cool.
Carving pumpkins.
Yeah, and the other comment I'm going to make is that photographing your work, I know over the years I've always tried to photograph for other people as much as possible, whether it's video, but primarily photograph the process and then the work itself, because about how frustrating that is to do the work and then have to photograph it yourself. I mean, it's like almost the thing changes and all of a sudden it's gone and the light's gone. And so have you worked with people just to help you document your work over the years?
No, I've always done all my own documentations, taking pictures of the progress, so especially with sand, and especially if there's a collapse, which has happened, and it happens to every sand carver. You at least have a record of what your work looked like before the incident.
That's good. Are you using a phone or using a camera or both?
Usually my phone.
Yeah. And is it Ottawa that you're resident in? Did you say? I didn't hear at the beginning.
Yes, I live in Ottawa.
Which part?
Elmvale Acres.
Elmvale, okay. Yeah, if you ever need somebody to photograph, let me know.
Okay.
I'll do it for free. There you go. I mean, and no, I love documenting the process. Yeah.
Okay. Well, if there's any way I can reach out to you,
Yep. I'll give you my contacts. Yeah. Like I used to do this years ago on a regular basis because I feel like a lot of artists need people just to document their process and before and after sometimes, like you. So it's I feel like it's a hardship for you to have to do it yourself, and it's frustrating. So nope, anytime you need it. I'll do
okay.
it.
Sure.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Comment from Boo. I'm an MA student working in clay. Senior experience in sand, snow, and ice was brilliant. I would love to have seen some slides of you working and also hearing more about your process. It sort of ties in with what Sharon was talking about documenting the process. I know it's hard to do when you're the artist, and to photograph yourself is rather difficult, but having somebody do that externally would I'm sure would be a very interest to other people to see the entire process, for sure. Does anybody have any more questions or comments for James? No. Okay. Well, listen. I'd like to thank James for a really interesting session. I remember, I've gone to Winterlude, as I'm sure all of you have, at different points in time, and had an opportunity to look at the ice sculptures in particular, and just marvel at first of all the art itself, but the technical ability to put those things, put these sculptures into reality. I'm just amazed. I'm just amazed. It's especially on a beautiful sunny day, which probably is not good for the ice, but it really gives that neat glistening effect, especially different points in the day, the way the light is hitting the sculpture. So James, I'd really like to thank you for your efforts and the session today. Next week, as I mentioned before, this presentation will be uploaded to our Pal YouTube channel. You'll also be receiving a survey probably next week, asking you about your impressions of today's session. So we'd appreciate if you could complete it and send it back, as it helps inform us for future presentations. Now next week is a busy week. We have actually 3 presentations. El Che, who is an artist, a visual artist, on Tuesday at 1 o'clock. CSARN, which is the Canadian Senior Artist Resource Network, that's on Wednesday at, I believe it's 2. And on Friday we have a very wonderful singer that recently performed at the benefit for the Mayfair Theatre, Danielle Allard. That's Friday night at 8 p.m. So really good lineup next week, and a really good lineup the week after as we close out June. We're almost into half the summer gone. Maybe not half, I don't know, third, something like that. But who's calculating how long the summer is? Sharon, you have a question?
Yeah, since we have a little buffer, since we have a little buffer here at the end, the hardship of being an artist that creates things and sort of disappears, the level of the ego that you need to be able to make something so extraordinary and then have it disappear. So you must be quite a spiritual being yourself, because you don't have that. You're not hanging on to this thing, What I have to ask, because 2 things. You've obviously come from many disciplines, and when you first started studying art, and in probably, I think the late 80s or early 90s or something. I'm going to suggest that you mentioned coming from George Brown.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which program?
Graphic design.
Yes, okay. Because design, yeah, I have heard many artists say, and I used to live in Toronto for 5 years, but that design itself, that studying design as a foundation is a way of, then it makes it's a connection to all the arts, like that, literally the study of design.
Mhm.
And then, so when you get sort of funneled down one laneway of being a fine artist or a sculptor, or I hate to say a filmmaker or any other form of music or art, that design really helps give you that base foundation for many forms of art. Is that how you feel? Or how do you feel about what your initial training and then where you went with that, the design work?
That's kind of a good question, because I did my diploma in graphic design when that facet was just transitioning into computer art.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So that's like a way of making a living. It's sort of like graphic art,
Yeah.
computer art. That's what you were thinking, right?
Well, it's like what I did at George Brown, it very quickly became obsolete.
Oh,
It's
really?
like, yes, that's how fast
Wow.
we're advancing at the time.
Hmm.
That
Mhm. You mean the technical side of it, like this, the
tech-
applications? Okay, yeah. That is frightening, because my sister's a graphic artist and I've done it myself, but not in it's super supreme professional world. But this animation now is a similar arena because it's all about the tools, isn't it?
It's about the high-tech tools.
This, right.
It's like it's one thing to have an artist, but now you're putting in the artist's hand a brand new tool that was never before.
Yeah. So you're I kind of like a life. I mean, I feel like this. You're a lifelong student in a way. Like you feel you're based. I'm saying you're going to be egoless because you just throw yourself in at the deep end in something where you don't have a background, so to speak. I mean, you've not done animation before, right?
No, that's completely new to me. That's going to be a new addition to my repertoire.
Well, that's why I say congratulations, because it's like so brave and fantastic. Yeah. Yay.
All this at a young age of 60.
I know. It's like
this.
you are my hero. Okay. Because this is exactly the way I feel like everybody it's better having that little, if you're connected with that sort of a life purpose, which is a lot of what people are searching for. They're very much searching for a purpose. You've kind of found an edge to that, which is really good, because the work that you've shown is really extraordinary.
Thank you.
Yeah, I second what Sharon has just said, that we all think that as we get older, it's we're sort of winding down, or even the term retired.
Yeah.
My father, my
Second childhood.
Dad, exactly. My dad was I don't have it in front of me, but maybe next time I'll show you. My dad was an artist as well, and but I guess when he was about 70, 72, 73, he took up soapstone sculpture, and he did a lot of the beautiful soapstone sculptures of a lot of Canadian wildlife, like birds and seals and polar bears and stuff like that. But he never did it before. He was an artist. He did oil painting and watercolor, but he never worked in that medium. But he was a very my father had a lot of patience and attention to detail. So he would sit for hours and hours outside in the backyard with, wearing a mask, obviously, and put together these beautiful objects. And he was already in his 70s when he started. So
Yeah.
never too old.
Father's Day is coming up. Here you go. I just had this very poignant experience this morning. My father died at my age suddenly of a blood clot, and when you're 60 and your life is over like that, it's like your life is just beginning. And and he was like a Renaissance man. He was a builder, he was an engineer, he was a mechanic, he was a gardener. He did everything, and he was one of those guys who could just do anything. And he was born on Lincoln's birthday, but I'm honoring his memory now just before Father's Day, of course, in kind of a good way. But I feel like he was just beginning again to take a hold of life and photograph. Like I'm totally into I'm a documentarian, and I'm interested in documenting the process of art, how it is created. I've always been fascinated with that. That is what drives me. And then but he himself, he had just started taking photography of his own flowers, because now I'm sort of coming back to touching the earth again and growing things and going, oh my God, like this is how he felt. And I'm getting back in touch with him and things that inspired him, even though it's like 30 years after his death, Yeah.
No, I can understand that. It's, we don't necessarily know these things when we're, teenagers and young adults growing up, but as we get older, we start, like whatever our parents said to us, or maybe whether we agreed or not, or all the things that they demonstrated to us, they just become part of us, and we start expressing those things. And we wonder, like, where did that come from? And we think, oh, well, I learned that from my mother, or I learned that every time I put a roast in the oven, I think Mom told me 350 for 2 hours. I remember saying 350, not 375, 350, and just all these things that we learned from our parents.
You keep having the conversation, like there's the whole idea that people have, they sort of, it sort of ends, the relationship seems to end, but then the conversation still goes on.
That's right.
And I feel like I am more in touch with him. The other day I was in a Quaker meeting, and we were doing informally, somebody had died suddenly in the meeting who was like fairly young, that she was a woman named Margaret. I won't say her full name, but she was a surprise because she was probably in her 70s, but she looked like she was 60. Of course, she looked younger. And then with these Zoom meetings, what we're doing is we're in these meetings that are silent, like a Quaker meeting is silent, and then we're looking at each other's faces in silence. And I had to say, the meeting, you don't speak unless you're moved to speak. That's what happens in a Quaker meeting. But I had to speak because I was suddenly moved to tears, because I realized that I had never really looked at my father's face until after he died. Never really looked at his face.
Yeah.
And then I realized how similar things about my face were to his face.
Yeah.
But you don't really, it's like an artist, it's all about seeing, but we don't really look. I mean, we don't take much time to look. And even with our own things we take for granted, the people in our lives. Now with this pandemic, we can actually see each other, although we're on a Zoom call.
Yeah, I know. There's a lot, hey, listen, I mean, there's a lot of, the very fact that you're having this conversation with your dad, not just on Father's Day, but on other days, is wonderful. What's really sad is when you can't have that conversation. Oh, even after they go, that's sad.
No, that's what I mean. No, so when I was 30 and he died and he was gone, you're just trying to get your handle on life and it's fun. But I will take it back to James and say, James, what was your influence from your parents or your family? Can I ask for your work?
Oh, really, I cannot see any influence from my own family.
At all? Nothing?
Nothing from my own family.
Because they didn't encourage you to be an artist, you mean?
Oh, it's
complicated.
Complicated.
It's okay. You don't have to answer if it's a personal thing, but I feel like even the people, what I heard this when I listened to the CBC, before I finish blithering on here, is that sometimes hearing about somebody else's relationship with their father or mother that you did not connect with, it's still, it's a restorative feeling, because it's sometimes the hoped for feeling that we never get, which no parent, no father, mother, and child ever has that conversation. We usually move on very quickly, and even, we don't even acknowledge what our children have done or what our parents have done. We didn't know them as young, we didn't know them on an equal basis. So what happens is we look at them in a jaded way. We look at our children or our parents like they're just in another world. They're an alien being almost. So by the time you realize that they were a young person like you, it's too late. It's too late. It's always usually too late to say, who were these people when they were my age? But now you're the person you are in some ways because of them, even if they didn't necessarily verbally, they didn't verbally support you. Maybe they didn't say things, but whatever life you had brought you to this point.
That's right.
So they did make you.
Absolutely. Yeah, we have their DNA.
I am doing now what I should have stuck by my guns for and done after high school.
But you are still like in that kind of a state of mind, which is wonderful that you are in this growing state. That I feel like I'm 16. I feel like I'd be happy living on sunflower seeds and grape juice and going to school for the rest of my life. To art school. That'd be like the dream life, is just go to art school your entire life and live on like very little. So who needs this stuff when you can have the experience,
Mm-hmm.
Who needs all this stuff? This is what we figured out, or a few have figured out. It's the experience of life. It's what you're doing, not what you have.
Exactly.
Hey,
So
Sharon.
You're doing wonderfully, James. You are a miracle person, okay? Yeah, sorry.
James, aren't you glad you showed up? You're getting praise and accolades. It's nice.
Yeah, it's like coming to a pep talk.
that's
know.
why-
I am your new fan, okay?
That's why PAL is such a great organization, because we all appreciate, I think, well, we all appreciate art in whatever form we like, but we all support each other, and it's a community. PAL is a community, and a growing community too. Shulamit, did you get a question?
Yeah, James, your work is fabulous, and I love what you said about you're doing now, what you should have done after high school, because I'm in a similar position. But Sharon, this is what the pandemic seclusion has been for me. It's like this art making orgy, and I can go to workshops from people all over the world. There's a Greek artist in Berlin who teaches life drawing a couple of times a week on Zoom. And so I'm able to have like tutoring in life drawing every week. There's people teaching watercolor. And so I'm getting to go to art school for this whole year. It's fantastic.
That's great.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's sort of like it's so restorative. It's like a newfound treasure. I feel like every day now is like, thank God. I feel like I literally feel like I even during the darkest of the pandemic, I was in a dark hole. Okay. I wasn't like this before. I was like, don't talk to me. I don't know what's going on. My mother just died a year ago, just before the pandemic. She was 89. I had to take care of her with my sister. I gave up, my life just to be with my family in Pennsylvania. But I'm saying that because I got the experience to give my mother time back, because you get so busy and then you do whatever you do. And then it's like, okay, what's important now is to be with somebody who gave you life. So that was just something I could do, but thank God it was before the pandemic. But then during the pandemic, I actually experienced the grief of her dying. So like a year later, I'm like, oh my God, I don't even know if it's worth living anymore. I didn't know which end was up. I was not optimistic, okay? And I was also an American who had to deal with Trump. So that was
Yes.
my skin had been removed from my body. I felt like I was totally exposed and being tortured every day. I was in pain.
Oh,
that's why-
I'm a Canadian living in the US. It is, yes, it was unbelievable.
Right.
But
So
also,
it's
I
pain.
loved what you said about looking at people's faces. We have a group of writers who, we used to meet and that was fine, but we have become so close now. And I think that that is a big part of it, is because now when we meet, we are looking into each other's faces
Mhm.
for 2 hours.
Mhm.
And it is a completely different experience.
Mhm.
And we've become quite intimate with each other in a way that we weren't over years of meeting.
Mhm.
You know how we walk down the street and like pre-pandemic and everybody's on their phones, they're looking like this. I see people crossing the street. Like when I cross the street, I'm looking like, left, right, up, because anything can happen at any time. Because I was almost killed in 1995 running across the street.
Mm.
So I'm wondering, after this pandemic, are people going to be into their phones less? And hopefully, like you say, Shalami, look at people's face when they're talking, studying, being more present, being more in the present.
I think
Then-
only a minority of people are going to hold on to the changes.
I think you're right. Unfortunately, I think you're right.
I mean, human nature is human nature. It hasn't changed.
Well, that's why this idea of, like, I call it being an artist is being with new eyes. Okay. So the idea of that when you have the near-death experience, and I feel like I have had it, and for different reasons at different times, it's very life restoring, because it's like, I'm still here. And like, now I'm not going to take this for granted, except then you start to, it gradually, you lose the new eyes again, and then you sort of slide into all the other sludge of life and stuff. But no, now I feel like, when I reached my father's age, and I said, it's like a lottery with my siblings. I have 2 sisters and a brother. I said, well, one of us is probably going to be gone by my father's age, because it was, historic. So it's a lottery. One of us is probably not going to make it. So when I was sort of getting up to that age, and I thought, okay, this is it. This is it. I'm almost there now. And I kind of prayed to God, I hope it's not going to happen, but I'm still here. So I feel like, wow, this is my extra time. So now to me, this is my extra time, because nobody else, even though they are living in the US in an unhealthier culture, I will say, because it's all about medical people taking medicines they don't need and taking medicines they do need. But here in Canada, we have so much more freedom and support. And if you're not impatient, I was going to say to James that, right, when you ask for support, people are surprised or they won't give it to you. You can't say, I need help. Like, the strongest person in the room will be the one that says, I need help. But usually for men, it's not considered to be a strength. You will be the last person to say, I need help. But I'm just going to guess for James, like, he probably hasn't been given a lot of, financial support from the community. And I feel like you're the kind of person who should be getting it. And you've dedicated a lot of your life to